The handcuffs clicked shut, biting into the wrists of a woman who knew the penal code better than the men arresting her. They thought they caught an easy target, a terrified citizen they could bully over a fabricated parking violation. They had no idea they just handcuffed a constitutional law professor. The Tuesday morning sun beat down relentlessly on the affluent, manicured sidewalks of Crestwood, a quiet, upscale suburb just 20 minutes outside the city. It was the kind of neighborhood where the lawns were measured in millimeters and a stray weed was considered a neighborhood crisis. Dr. Vivian Sterling, a 42-year-old black woman with impeccable posture and a brilliant legal mind, navigated her silver Volvo sedan down Elm Street. Vivian was the youngest tenured professor at Harrison University Law School, holding a dual doctorate in constitutional law and criminal procedure. She was a woman who spent her days dissecting Supreme Court rulings, tearing apart complex legal doctrines, and intimidating third-year law students into achieving greatness. But on this particular morning, she was simply a woman trying to grab an iced matcha latte from her favorite local spot, the Roasted Bean. Before delivering a keynote lecture on Fourth Amendment violations, she spotted a parking space on the street, just ahead of a bright yellow fire hydrant. Vivian, meticulous in every aspect of her life, didn't just guess the distance. She parallel parked with precision, her rear bumper resting a clear, indisputable 17 feet from the hydrant. The local municipal code mandated a 15-foot clearance. She was 2 feet in the clear. She gathered her leather briefcase, smoothed her tailored navy blue suit, and walked into the cafe. Outside, the air-conditioned hum of a Crestwood County Sheriff's Department cruiser broke the morning silence. Inside the vehicle sat Deputy Travis Gable and his rookie partner, Deputy Logan Reed. Gable was a 12-year veteran of the force, a man whose thick neck and perpetually furrowed brow hinted at a career built on intimidation rather than de-escalation. He had a reputation in the department for being proactive, a polite, administrative term for a man who actively sought out confrontation. Reed, young and impressionable, mostly kept his mouth shut and followed Gable's lead. As the cruiser rolled past the Roasted Bean, Gable's eyes locked onto Vivian's Volvo. More specifically, they locked onto Vivian as she exited the cafe, iced drink in hand, walking back toward the car. In Gable's eyes, Vivian didn't fit the usual Crestwood demographic. "Look at this," Gable muttered, tapping the steering wheel. "People think they can park wherever they want. Looks like she's clear of the hydrant, Travis," Reed offered tentatively, squinting at the curb. "She's too close," Gable snapped, throwing the cruiser into park right in the middle of the street, the flashing light bar bursting to life, painting the surrounding brick storefronts in harsh red and blue. Vivian had just unlocked her car door when the heavy thud of the cruiser's doors shutting caught her attention. She turned, her expression neutral, as Deputy Gable marched toward her, his hand resting casually but purposefully on his duty belt. "Is there a problem, officers?" Vivian asked, her voice calm and modulated. It was the exact tone she used when a student gave a fundamentally flawed answer in her classroom. "License and registration," Gable demanded, stopping a few feet from her. He didn't offer a greeting or an explanation. "I'm happy to cooperate, Deputy," Vivian said, her eyes briefly flicking to the brass nameplate on his chest, burning Gable into her eidetic memory. "But may I ask why you are requesting my identification?" "I haven't committed a moving violation." Gable's jaw tightened. He despised questions. "You're illegally parked. Too close to the hydrant. Now hand over your ID." Vivian glanced at the hydrant, then back to the deputy. "Officer Gable, Municipal Code Section 11.40.30 requires a 15-foot distance from a fire hydrant. My vehicle is approximately 17 to 18 feet away. I am parked legally. Therefore, I am not required to provide identification under these circumstances." Reed, standing a few paces behind his partner, shifted uncomfortably. He had never heard a citizen quote the exact municipal code off the top of their head. Gable, however, saw red. To him, this wasn't a legal discussion. It was a challenge to his authority. "I don't need a law lesson from you, lady. I am the one who determines if you are parked illegally. You are obstructing a fire lane, and now you are failing to identify yourself to a sworn peace officer." "I am not refusing to identify myself in a vacuum," Vivian replied, her voice remaining impossibly steady. "I am informing you that under Brown v. Texas, you cannot compel me to identify myself without reasonable, articulable suspicion that I am engaged in criminal activity. A parking infraction, which this is not, is a civil municipal violation, not a crime." Gable sneered, stepping into her personal space, attempting to use his physical size to cow her. "You think you're smart? You think throwing around a bunch of legal mumbo-jumbo is gonna get you out of a ticket? Now, give me your ID, or you're going in cuffs." "I am not giving you my identification, deputy," Vivian stated firmly, standing her ground, her eyes locking onto his without a flicker of fear. "Because you have no lawful basis to demand it. If you believe I am parked illegally, write the citation to the license plate. But you are not legally permitted to detain me." The air between them crackled. Gable's face flushed a deep crimson. He wasn't used to defiance, let alone defiance wrapped in airtight legal precedent. In his world, compliance was mandatory, and the badge was the final word. "All right, turn around and put your hands behind your back," Gable barked, lunging forward and grabbing Vivian's left wrist. His grip was rough, designed to inflict just enough pain to force submission. "Deputy, I am informing you that you are executing an unlawful arrest," Vivian said, her voice raising slightly in volume, not out of panic, but to ensure there were witnesses. "You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable seizure." Yeah, tell it to the judge," Gable grunted, aggressively twisting her arm behind her back. From the window of the Roasted Bean, Sarah Jenkins, the cafe owner, noticed the commotion. Seeing the aggressive handling of her regular customer, Sarah quickly pushed open the glass door, her smartphone already raised and recording. "Hey, what are you doing to her?" Sarah yelled from the sidewalk. "She didn't do anything wrong. She was just buying tea." Gable whipped his head around. "Back up. Interfere with a police investigation, and you're going to jail too," he roared at Sarah. "I'm on a public sidewalk recording an arrest," Sarah shot back, her hands shaking slightly but the camera remaining focused. "You're hurting her." "I am perfectly fine, Sarah," Vivian said clearly over her shoulder, even as the cold, unforgiving steel of the handcuffs ratcheted tightly around her wrists, pinching her skin. "Make sure you capture their badge numbers. And note the distance of my car from the hydrant." Deputy Reed stepped forward, trying to block Sarah's camera view. "Ma'am, please step back. It's for your own safety." "My safety?" Sarah scoffed. "She's a college professor. For God's sake. What is wrong with you guys?" Gable ignored the bystander, roughly patting Vivian down a search incident to an arrest he fabricated out of thin air and bruised ego. He found her wallet in her suit jacket pocket, pulled it out, and flipped it open. He glanced at her driver's license. "Vivian Sterling," Gable read aloud, a smirk playing on his lips. "Well, Vivian, you just talked yourself into a trip to county lockup." "Deputy Gable," Vivian said, her tone suddenly shifting from conversational to coldly analytical. "I want you to note the time. It is 8:42 a.m. You have detained me without reasonable suspicion, arrested me without probable cause, and conducted an illegal search of my person. You are officially operating outside the scope of your qualified immunity." Gable let out a harsh, barking laugh as he shoved her toward the back of the cruiser. "Qualified immunity? Lady, I don't know what sovereign citizen internet forums you read, but out here in the real world, you disobey a lawful order. You take a ride. Watch your head." He forcefully guided her into the back seat, slamming the heavy door shut behind her. Inside the cruiser, the smell of stale sweat and strong industrial cleaner assaulted Vivian's senses. The hard plastic seat offered no comfort, and her arms ached from the awkward angle of the cuffs. Yet, Her heart rate was remarkably slow. She wasn't experiencing the blind terror Gable had hoped to instill. She was experiencing the sharp, focused clarity of a predator, realizing its prey had just walked willingly into a trap. Gable got into the driver's seat, tossing her wallet onto the dashboard. Reed slid into the passenger side, looking a bit pale. "Did we really need to hook her up, Travis?" Reed asked quietly as Gable threw the car into drive and peeled away from the curb. "I mean, it's just a parking thing." She refused a lawful order to identify. "Logan," Gable stated loudly, making sure Vivian could hear him through the metal partition. "That's resisting, delaying, or obstructing an officer. These entitled people come into our town, think the rules don't apply to them, think they can run their mouths. Sometimes you gotta teach them a lesson in respect. Respect is earned through the lawful execution of one's duties. Deputy." Vivian's voice floated from the back seat, calm and piercing, not through the unconstitutional application of force to soothe a fragile ego. Gable slammed his hand against the steering wheel. "Keep running your mouth back there, Vivian. It's only gonna add to your charges. Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, failure to identify. Please, pile them on," Vivian replied softly, almost a whisper. "Every fraudulent charge you invent will look exquisite on the civil complaint." The rest of the 20-minute drive to the Crestwood County Sheriff's Precinct was conducted in tense silence. Gable drove aggressively, taking turns sharply, hoping the rough ride would rattle the woman in the back. But Vivian sat stoically. She was mentally cataloging everything: the tight cuffs, excessive force, the lack of Miranda warnings, though she hadn't been interrogated yet. It was a point of procedure. The false charges. She thought about her 10 a.m. lecture. She would have to miss it. Her students would be disappointed, but as she stared at the back of Gable's thick neck, a small, dangerous smile touched the corners of her mouth. She was going to teach a masterclass today, after all. It just wasn't going to be in a lecture hall. The cruiser pulled into the gated sally port of the precinct. The heavy steel doors rolled down behind them with a loud, final clang. Gable got out, opened the back door, and hauled Vivian out by her arm. "Welcome to Crestwood County," Gable sneered. "Let's see how much law you know when you're sitting in a holding cell." He had no idea. He truly had no idea that he hadn't just arrested a citizen. He had just ignited a legal bomb that was about to level his entire career, his department's budget, and the corrupt culture of the precinct. The Crestwood County Sheriff's Precinct booking area was a masterclass in bureaucratic misery. The air smelled of harsh industrial bleach, stale coffee, and the metallic tang of nervous sweat. Fluorescent lights buzzed aggressively overhead, casting long, unflattering shadows across the scuffed linoleum floor. Deputy Travis Gable swaggered up to the raised booking desk, pulling Vivian by the chain of her handcuffs. Behind the reinforced glass sat Desk Sergeant Thomas Brody, a 30-year veteran who was merely counting down the days until his pension kicked in. Brody looked over the top of his reading glasses, his expression reflecting absolute boredom. "What do you have for me this morning, Travis?" Brody sighed, sliding a booking sheet forward. "You're supposed to be running speed traps on Route 9. Got a live one, Sarge," Gable said, puffing out his chest. "Refusal to identify, resisting, delaying a peace officer, and obstructing a fire lane. Real piece of work. Thinks she knows the law better than we do." Vivian stood perfectly still, her posture erect despite her arms being pinned uncomfortably behind her back. She did not look at Gable. She locked eyes with Sergeant Brody. "Sergeant," Vivian said, her voice cutting through the hum of the precinct like a scalpel. "My name is Dr. Vivian Sterling. I am requesting that my handcuffs be removed, as I pose no flight risk or physical threat, and I am formally requesting my constitutionally guaranteed right to legal counsel." Brody blinked. He was used to screaming, crying, and drunken belligerence. He was not used to articulate, commanding requests delivered with the chilling precision of a judge issuing a ruling. "Empty your pockets, ma'am," Brody mumbled, typing her name into the county database. Gable tossed Vivian's wallet onto the steel counter. "She wouldn't give her ID," Gable sneered, leaning against the desk. Had to pull it myself. Write her up for the whole list, Tommy. Brody opened the wallet, pulled out the sleek, gold-embossed driver's license, and began inputting her information. As the cursor blinked on the screen, the state database pulled up Vivian's profile. No warrants. No criminal history. Not even a speeding ticket. Brody clicked on the supplementary employment database linked to the state tax records. The screen refreshed. Employer: Harrison University. Department: School of Law. Title: Distinguished Chair of Constitutional Law and Criminal Procedure. Brody stopped typing. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a man who had just swallowed a live wasp. He slowly looked up from the monitor, staring at Vivian, and then shifted his gaze to Gable, who was currently checking his reflection in the glass partition. "Travis," Brody said, his voice dropping an octave, a distinct tremor of panic leaking into his tone. "Did you verify the distance of her vehicle from the hydrant before you initiated the Terry stop?" Gable scoffed. "She was close enough." "Why?" "Just print the sheet, Sarge." "Because, Travis, you monumental idiot," Brody hissed, leaning closer to the glass so his voice wouldn't carry across the bullpen. "You didn't just arrest a piece of work. You arrested the woman who literally wrote the textbook the state academy uses to train us on Fourth Amendment search and seizure." Gable froze. The arrogant smirk finally melted off his face. "What?" "She's a tenured law professor, Travis. A constitutional scholar," Brody whispered frantically, his fingers trembling over the keyboard. He looked at Vivian, whose face remained a mask of polite, terrifying patience. "Dr. Sterling, I am so sorry. Let me get those cuffs off you right now." Brody buzzed himself out of the secure booth and practically sprinted around the desk. "Hold on, Sarge," Gable protested, stepping in front of Vivian. "She broke the law." She resisted. "You can't just unarrest her." "Move, deputy." A new, authoritative voice barked from the hallway. Captain Richard Davis, the precinct's shift commander, stormed into the booking area. His face was thunderous, and in his right hand, he held a smartphone playing a video. It was Sarah Jenkins' video from the cafe, and it had already racked up 50,000 views on Twitter. The caption read, "Crestwood Sheriff's assault and arrest prominent black law professor for buying tea. Car was clearly 17+ feet from hydrant. Justice for Vivian, police brutality." "Get those cuffs off her immediately," Captain Davis ordered, glaring daggers at Gable. "And Gable, surrender your weapon and your badge to Sergeant Brody. You are suspended pending an internal affairs investigation." "Captain, wait. You're not seeing the whole picture," Gable stammered, his bravado entirely shattered. "I saw enough," Davis snapped. "I just got a phone call from the mayor, the chief of police, and the dean of Harrison Law School within the span of 4 minutes. Take off her cuffs. Now." Brody quickly unlocked the steel bracelets. Vivian brought her arms forward, slowly rubbing the angry red welts on her wrists. She didn't rub them to seek pity. She did it to draw attention to the physical evidence of excessive force. "Dr. Sterling," Captain Davis said, suddenly adopting a tone of extreme, obsequious diplomacy, "this has been a terrible misunderstanding. A breakdown in training. If you would please accompany me to my office, I'd like to offer you a cup of coffee and clear this all up right now." "I do not want your coffee, Captain Davis," Vivian replied, her voice echoing in the dead silence of the booking room. "And there is nothing to clear up. The actions taken today were not a misunderstanding. They were a deliberate, malicious deprivation of my civil rights under the color of law. Now, if I am free to go, I have a phone call to make. My attorney is waiting." 30 minutes later, the automatic doors of the precinct hissed open, and the storm arrived. Gregory Hayes did not walk into a room. He invaded it. As the managing partner of Hayes, Croft and Sinclair, the most feared civil rights litigation firm on the eastern seaboard, Gregory was a man who smelled blood in the water from miles away. Dressed in a sharply tailored charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, he bypassed the public waiting area entirely and marched straight toward the secure double doors leading to the bullpen. "Excuse me, sir. You can't go back there," the civilian receptionist yelled. "I am Gregory Hayes, representing Dr. Vivian Sterling," he boomed, not breaking stride. "If anyone attempts to impede my access to my client, I will add them to the federal lawsuit I am drafting in my head right now." He pushed through the doors just as Captain Davis was attempting, for the third time, to coax Vivian into signing a waiver of liability in a glass-walled conference room. "Dr. Sterling, please," Davis pleaded, sliding a printed sheet of paper across the table. "If you sign this, acknowledging no fault on the county's behalf, we wipe the arrest record completely clean. It's like it never happened. You walk out of here. No harm, no foul." "Captain Davis, are you attempting to coerce my client into signing a waiver of liability while she is still effectively under duress?" Gregory's voice cracked like a whip as he entered the room, slamming his leather briefcase onto the table. Davis jumped, instantly recognizing the legendary attorney. "Mr. Hayes, we're just having a conversation. Dr. Sterling is free to leave. She was free to leave an hour ago when your deputy unlawfully detained her on a public sidewalk," Gregory snarled, pulling the waiver out from under Davis's hand and ripping it neatly in half. "Vivian, are you injured?" Bruising on the wrists, shoulder pain from the hyperextension during the application of the cuffs, and emotional distress, Vivian recited clinically, standing up from her chair. "Deputy Gable also conducted an illegal search of my person." "Excellent," Gregory said, turning his predatory gaze back to the captain. "Captain Davis, here is what is going to happen. We are leaving. You will secure all body cam footage, dash cam footage, and radio dispatches from Deputy Gable and Deputy Reed. If a single frame of data goes missing, I will ask the Department of Justice to place this entire precinct under a federal consent decree." Davis swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. "Mr. Hayes, the department is prepared to handle this internally. Gable has been suspended." "Internal affairs?" Vivian spoke up, her voice dropping the polite veneer entirely. She walked toward the captain, forcing him to look her in the eyes. "Captain, I had a group of third-year law students conduct an independent study last semester on municipal payouts for police misconduct in this county. Guess whose name appeared in 3 separate, sealed out-of-court settlements in the last 5 years? Davis went pale. He knew exactly what she was talking about. Gable had a history of excessive force, but the police union had always managed to sweep it under the rug, paying off the victims with taxpayer money and burying the files. "You knew he was a liability," Vivian continued, her tone relentless. "You kept a known aggressor on the street because you prioritized union politics over citizen safety. Deputy Gable picked the wrong person today. I am not going to settle quietly. I am not going to sign a non-disclosure agreement. I am going to drag this department's corrupt culture into the blinding light of a federal courtroom." She picked up her briefcase, the one she had been carrying when she was arrested. "Gregory, let's go. I have a press conference to organize." As Vivian and Gregory walked out of the conference room, the precinct bullpen was completely silent. Dozens of officers stared at their monitors or looked down at their shoes. In the far corner, stripped of his badge and gun, Travis Gable sat at a desk, his head in his hands. He watched Vivian walk past him, her head held high, completely unbroken. Karma wasn't just coming, it had already arrived, dressed in a tailored navy suit. By 2 p.m. that afternoon, the video had surpassed 2 million views. Major cable news networks were running it on a loop. The hashtag number Fire Gable was trending globally. At 4 p.m., Vivian stood behind a podium on the steps of Harrison University Law School, flanked by Gregory Hayes, the dean of the law school, and a coalition of local civil rights leaders. The flashes of dozens of cameras illuminated the bruising on her wrists. "Today," Vivian began, leaning into the microphone, her voice steady and resolute, "a law enforcement officer attempted to strip me of my dignity and my constitutional rights over a fabricated parking violation. He assumed I was voiceless. He assumed I was uneducated. He assumed I was powerless. He was fundamentally incorrect. She looked directly into the news cameras, her eyes burning with an unyielding fire. The lawsuit we filed precisely 20 minutes ago in the United States District Court is not just about a bruised wrist. It is about demanding accountability from a system that routinely preys upon those it assumes cannot fight back. My name is Dr. Vivian Sterling, and court is now officially in session. The ensuing months transformed Crestwood County from a quiet, affluent suburb into ground zero for a national conversation on police reform. The lawsuit filed by Dr. Vivian Sterling and her attorney, Gregory Hayes, was a masterpiece of legal engineering. It wasn't merely a personal injury claim. It was a sprawling, meticulously documented civil rights lawsuit filed under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, targeting not just Deputy Travis Gable, but the Crestwood County Sheriff's Department and the municipality itself under the Monell Doctrine. The first major twist arrived during the discovery phase. The police union, heavily backing Gable, claimed that the cruiser's dashcam had suffered a convenient technical malfunction precisely 2 minutes before the arrest. They thought this would force a he-said-she-said scenario, banking on the traditional deference juries often gave to law enforcement. They grossly underestimated Vivian's reach. Vivian's third-year law students, treating their professor's case as the ultimate practicum, canvassed Elm Street. They didn't just rely on Sarah Jenkins' viral cell phone footage. They located a high-definition security camera tucked under the awning of a boutique jeweler, directly across the street from the fire hydrant. The defense didn't know it existed. When Gregory Hayes played the jeweler's footage during Gable's deposition, the room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The video clearly showed Vivian's silver Volvo parking. It then showed a digital overlay, applied by a forensic video analyst, confirming the distance, exactly 17 feet and 4 inches from the hydrant. But the truly damning part was what happened next. The video captured Gable's cruiser idling down the street, stopping, and Gable explicitly pointing at Vivian as she walked away, long before he even looked at the car's proximity to the hydrant. It established undeniably that the stop was pretextual and targeted. Sitting across the mahogany table in the deposition room, Gable sweated profusely. His union-appointed lawyer, a bulldog named Richard Thompson, looked visibly sick. "Deputy Gable," Gregory Hayes began, his voice dangerously soft as he paused the video. "Can you explain to me why you identified my client as a target before you ever assessed the legality of her parking?" Gable swallowed hard, pulling at his collar. "I was observing the area. We had reports of—" He trailed off. "There were no reports. Let the record reflect the deponent is unable to answer," Gregory stated coldly. "Now, let's discuss your disciplinary file, a file that Captain Davis swore under oath did not contain any sustained complaints of excessive force." Gregory slid a thick, heavily redacted folder across the table. It was the second twist. Vivian had reached out to her vast network of legal scholars. Renowned civil rights attorney Brian Stevenson and his team at the Equal Justice Initiative had quietly assisted Vivian behind the scenes, providing her legal team with an amicus brief and access to a brilliant private investigator who uncovered 3 sealed out-of-court settlements involving Gable over the past decade. The department had paid out nearly $1.2 million to minority residents whom Gable had assaulted, burying the paperwork each time. "We have sworn affidavits from 3 previous victims, Deputy," Vivian said, speaking directly to Gable for the first time in months. "The pattern is undeniable. You isolate, you escalate, and you assault. The only difference this time is that you put your hands on a woman who writes the legal standards you are supposed to uphold." The deposition was a slaughter. By the time it concluded, Richard Thompson was begging for a settlement conference. But Vivian wasn't interested in the county's money. She wanted their absolute surrender. The karma hit with catastrophic force 3 weeks later. Judge Eleanor Higgins, a federal judge known for her strict adherence to constitutional protections, issued a summary judgment ruling that stripped Travis Gable of his qualified immunity. Because Vivian had explicitly cited the law and established that her rights were being violated in real time during the arrest, Judge Higgins ruled that any reasonable officer would have known their actions were unlawful. Without qualified immunity, Gable was personally liable for damages. The police union, realizing the PR nightmare and the undeniable evidence, quietly withdrew their financial backing. Gable was suddenly entirely alone. The panic in the Crestwood mayor's office reached a fever pitch. If the case went to a federal jury, the punitive damages could bankrupt the town. The mayor ordered the chief of police and Captain Davis to capitulate to all of Vivian's demands. On a rainy Thursday morning, the settlement was finalized, but it was unlike any agreement Crestwood County had ever seen. First, Dr. Vivian Sterling demanded a relatively modest financial payout of $250,000, which she immediately donated in full to a scholarship fund for minority law students at Harrison University. Second, the structural changes were absolute. Crestwood County was forced into a federal consent decree. Their entire patrol division would be subjected to independent, third-party oversight for 5 years. The department was mandated to rewrite their use of force policies, and Vivian herself was appointed as the unpaid, independent chair of the Civilian Review Board. Third, and most devastating for the men who had wronged her, accountability. Captain Richard Davis was forced into early, disgraced retirement for his role in covering up Gable's prior offenses. But the hardest blow was reserved for Travis Gable. As a non-negotiable condition of the settlement, Gable had to be formally terminated with cause. Furthermore, Vivian's legal team submitted his disciplinary file and the federal judge's ruling to the State Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission. 2 months later, Gable's law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. He could never wear a badge or carry a gun in a professional capacity anywhere in the United States ever again. Because he was stripped of his qualified immunity and forced to hire private defense counsel for the civil damages, Gable's finances were completely drained. He lost his house in the suburbs. His pension was severely penalized due to a newly enacted state clause regarding officers fired for federal civil rights violations. 1 year after the arrest on Elm Street, Dr. Vivian Sterling stood at the front of her packed lecture hall. The projector behind her displayed a slide on the Fourth Amendment and the concept of unreasonable search and seizure. "The law is not merely a set of suggestions," Vivian told her enraptured students, her voice ringing with authority and hard-won triumph. "It is the invisible armor that protects the citizenry from the tyranny of the state. But armor only works if you are willing to maintain it, test it, and, when necessary, use it to break the sword of those who strike you unjustly." Across town, in the fluorescent-lit aisles of a big-box hardware store, a man in a blue vest with a name tag reading, Travis slowly pushed a heavy cart of fertilizer toward the garden center. His shoulders were slumped, his face lined with premature aging and bitter exhaustion. As he passed the electronics department, a row of display televisions was tuned to a local news channel. An anchor was interviewing a prominent legal expert about a recent Supreme Court ruling. Travis stopped, his grip tightening on the handle of his cart until his knuckles turned white. There, on a dozen glowing screens, was Dr. Vivian Sterling, looking sharp, brilliant, and utterly unbothered. She articulated her points with the same calm, piercing clarity that had terrified him in the back of his cruiser a year ago. Travis stared at the woman who had systematically dismantled his entire life. He had tried to put her in a cage just to satisfy his own ego. Instead, she had built a prison of accountability around him, locking him inside his own consequences and throwing away the key. He looked down at his rough, calloused hands, swallowed the heavy lump of humiliation in his throat, and went back to pushing his cart. He finally understood the lesson she had promised to teach him. The gavel's final strike echoed far beyond the courtroom, shattering a long-standing culture of impunity. Dr. Vivian Sterling didn't just win a lawsuit. She completely rewrote the rules of engagement for Crestwood County. Travis Gable learned the hardest, most devastating lesson of his life. True justice is not dictated by a tin badge, but by the unwavering letter of the law. Power ultimately belongs to those who know how to wield it.